Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with Marcus Vaughan from Iluminr today. Marcus, great first segment. We talked about micro simulations. Let's change gears a little bit and let's talk about capability development. What do you mean by that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think everyone's got to take on what does capability mean. So when we look at and think about capability, we are thinking a little bit broader and more holistically than purely just skill sets. We're looking at how an organization can deliver an outcome, and that is through a mixture of people and capability from people, but also how it collaborates together, how teams of people collaborate, how they operate within the environment that they have. So looking at I guess, the ecosystem of resources. So looking at, how they leverage obviously technology, physical assets, and relationships as well. So it is a pretty broad and holistic term, capability. How we look at it is, again, how do we break this down and look at various different elements within the organization and the teams and the people within that? How do they leverage, I guess, skills, resources to essentially deliver an outcome for the organization?
How do you go about measuring something like that? Because to be able to measure it, you kind of have to have a starting point, create a benchmark
Yeah.
or something. So how do you go about identifying and measuring these different capabilities, considering you did mention different people, different teams, different skill sets. So how do you bring that all together to measure to say we're in good shape or everyone's, out to lunch? How do you go about
Yeah.
measuring?
For intent to lunch. And we do see a little bit of that. So it's a really good question. And I think first and foremost, capturing, I guess, data on it is absolutely critical, right? And we, I guess, advocate you don't always have to have a benchmark to start with. That's something that you can build up with over time. Certainly, one of our observations is that simulations and exercising is a great way to really, I guess, identify, accentuate, stress test what those capabilities look like within people, but also how do they operate as teams? What's the dynamics? What's the communications look like? So the way that we tackle that is by running simulations and micro simulations more often than not, to measure exactly how are people operating under these conditions, operating together, their specific roles and what they need to get done, how they operating in conjunction with the technology that they have or lack of technology that they have, and other resources they have access to. So one of the, I guess, the problems we set out to solve is that I think, tabletop exercising has always been a great way to do that. I don't think there's anything new about that. I think it's been a fantastic way to test capabilities and exercise capabilities and develop capabilities. Where we saw that falling down was data being captured from that was very dispersed, often captured in Word templates. Like again, back when I was a consultant, we used to run tabletop exercises. We would have a piece of paper that was the hot debrief and like survey fill-in form. And that got scanned into a PDF and it was someone's writing on a page. So it was almost illegible half the time. And there's a huge amount of information on that, but it doesn't really connect to create that, I guess, that map of how an organization looks in terms of its strengths and weaknesses from a capability development perspective. So how do we do it now? We'll obviously leverage technology as a force multiplier. It's an opportunity to bring a lot of this data together about an organization's capabilities. Um, when setting that up, capturing it consistently is really important. So having a relatively consistent template to capture those findings from various different simulations, and then obviously bringing that data together as well. That's really important. So, a great way to look at this and how we do that, you might look at a particular audience or cohort across an organization, and you might look at that in multiples. So, for instance, you might look at a single crisis management team at group level, but you might also want to look at how are regional incident management or crisis management teams operating. You might want to look at how, critical operations or important business service owners and teams are operating, but you want to look at them consistently. So running sets, and we call them tracks, of micro simulations across those with a consistent capture to say, hey, how are you going? Or how did that particular simulation go? What observations came out of that where we could improve? How, how confident do they even feel about their ability to respond under that? Do they feel like they need more training and development of particular skill sets or capabilities? Identifying that information cohort by cohort, and then obviously aggregating that data to generate some insights out of it and saying, okay, so we've run, you know, 50 cyber scenarios across, 20 different cohorts. You start bringing together that data on who's like really effectively responding, who are identifying more gaps than others, how confident are they feeling. You can start identifying opportunities to train and develop those staff further on specific capabilities they need to develop. So measuring that through simulations is a really, I guess, powerful way to, as opposed to just because you get to watch it happen, and they get to go through the process of, again, maybe I don't know all the answers right now. So how am I, developing using the resources around me to effectively respond, measuring those, as opposed to just, do you feel like you've got this under control? Yes, no. So we measure through stress testing, I guess, and exercising, bring that all together to identify those trends and opportunities.
Do you categorize data? Is there specific data you should be looking at? The level of training, the level of awareness, documentation, or participation, anything like that, or skill levels,
Yeah.
because you mentioned data. Well, literally anything can be data. So, is there
So,
specific
yeah.
categories we should be kind of focusing on at least?
Yeah, so I guess our experience so far in rolling out micro simulation programs, that you're right, there are actually various different sets of categories that you can look at. So you can look at participation rates, really simple. Are people turning up? Are people not turning up? Do we have an engagement issue with a particular part of the business? You can look at confidence levels as another really good one. You can also look at through the tasks that may have been set in a micro simulation, did we achieve the objectives we set out for? So you can look at the rate of objective completion and success rates across that. So if you run a particular micro simulation 50 times across 50 different groups of people, you might see that, hey, like 30 of those only achieve one objective, the other 20 achieve, 3 out of 3 objectives. That gives you high level data. You can go and obviously scrutinize what's down below that and go, well, how did they actually go on these tasks against that? Because it's not just a yes, no answer, it's like, no, they actually did something to accomplish that objective. Then you can feel comfortable once you obviously looked at that data that, yeah, we've got something here, but we've also got a trend here and we know where we need to focus that. So yeah, categorizing data is absolutely a critical part of it. And it always comes down to what do you, as an organization, do you believe you need to focus on? And start measuring that sooner rather than later, obviously consistently, so you can start identifying that. But I think again, what's been fascinating through this whole journey with Iluminr and rolling this out and putting this in the hands of our practitioners is just the range of different things that people want to capture. There's obviously like I said, so regulations always thought about quite heavily because at the end of the day, you're typically going to have to show, did we do an activity? Yes, no. Did we have the right people in the room? Yes, no. And did we meet these set objectives and can evidence that we did these things that the regulator needs us to prove that we're essentially stress testing? But there's a whole heap of other factors there. Like I said, confidence levels, training requirements, the interest in, we even ask questions in some micro simulation data sets around, are there particular threats or scenarios that they're concerned about? So you can start identifying, from the ground, like, right out across, you think about a multinational, right out across different regions, and it brings in that centralized intelligence around, this team in LATAM is really concerned about kidnapping, where, what's happening in Asia is totally different again.
Yeah.
Versus the US, versus Canada, versus Australia. So it does allow you to bring a lot of that together to identify that. So yes, categorizing data is very important. I'm just constantly amazed when I work with professionals right across the world, the different ways that they're looking at this. Core, like I said, one of the core pieces is always regulation, but there's a lot that you can capture outside of that, of course.
And no matter what you're capturing, hopefully what it does will give you a path forward. You
Mm,
know, where do we go next? What do we
absolutely.
need to
Absolutely.
address to build upon? We're doing great in this area, a little bit of improvement. How come we got a low
Yeah.
score in this area? We need to
That's
focus.
right.
There's something we might be doing wrong here, right? It
Yeah.
develops that path forward.
Absolutely. And I think, again, working with a lot of resilience teams worldwide, like the one common thread I always see is just the lack of investment into those teams to do more. And what we're certainly seeing from that data capture, we start aggregating it, is that you're able to build a business case and saying, hey, we've got a deficiency in some certain capabilities and some certain teams on a certain threat over here, or we've identified some really interesting gaps, out in this particular region or in this particular team that might be sitting on a critical operation or important business service. Uh, if we don't fix that, the impact is X. So it helps you look at, rather than broad brush, hey, we need to invest into cyber training. It's, well, actually, we might need to invest more into cyber training over here, but this team over here, because of just the nature of like their proximity to the cybersecurity team or cyber ops team, or just could be the IT team. So they're just more aware of the threat and the risk. Maybe it isn't such a heavy investment right across the board. So it allows resilience practitioners to have a data-led conversation around where they need investment into the organization. Obviously, the business case, because you can quite quickly line it up against an impact and an impact threshold. Say, if we don't invest in this deficiency that we've identified, you have to understand that it could be a critical operation, has, the ability to bring our organization down from a regulatory perspective, but also serving our customers. And so, hey, you've got a really clear business decision that can go up the chain. So you can go, hey, we definitely need to invest. So it gives, I guess, the opportunity to have a data-led conversation and get that investment back into resilience and training and capability development.
I like something that you alluded to there. Different teams will have different your results. And what I was thinking of is you could have team A that does really well under a specific scenario, but the
Mm,
next simulation, they don't do as well. So
yeah,
you can also identify what it is about that scenario or that
spot on.
situation where they didn't do well. Oh, they're missing a certain process, or they're unaware of a dependency, or something like
Spot on.
that. You know, there's a communication
Spot
thread that's missing. So you can
spot on.
even they can do well in one and bad in another.
Yeah, I mean, and if I think about, a recent example that came up to me just this week, working again with a major organized global organization, but they're quite concerned about the level of preparedness and just awareness around workplace violence threats. And in particular, obviously, California is probably ahead of the game in terms of implementing regulation across that. But if you think about that scenario, so you might have a cyber ops team that are like strong on cybersecurity awareness. Like they don't need to be taught about phishing. Like it's
Yeah,
just not
yeah.
a requirement. But they might need to think about workplace violence. It's totally out of their wheelhouse, right? So you're able to look at one team against a variety of different threats, and rather than saying broad brush, this is what everyone needs to do, it's like that team is actually pretty solid on that. Let's like they're already getting what they need there because then it's naturally part of their job. But over here, yeah, there's some capability development that needs to be brought up, risk awareness that needs to be brought up. So it's like I said, it's just a way to get more, I guess, focused on the acute nerve pain of the organization and saying, let's invest this here because it's a requirement, not so much over there.
Well, believe it or not, we've come to the end of our second segment already.
Wow, that was quick.
Yeah, it was. Thanks, Marcus. We are going to come back for segment three, and we're going to be talking about one of his favorite topics, operational resilience. We
Here
will
we
be
go.
right back.